Questions mount about the 16 children at the center of the Ciders case. Officials say they were hidden from the world for years, and they could hold the key to explaining what was going on behind closed doors. How will
You're looking at a house where investigators say 16 children were living and where the full truth is only now starting to come out. Officials say these kids were hidden from the outside world for years, and they may be the ones who can finally explain what was at this point undisclosed happening behind those closed doors. So how do investigators get to the truth from here? Let's walk through exactly what's confirmed, what's alleged, and what's still unknown. On June 30th, law enforcement executed a search warrant at a home on Omar Street and removed 16 children. 6 were younger, including 3 sets of twins. The remaining children are old enough that they may eventually be able to tell investigators and children's services workers what their day-to-day lives actually look like over the past decade or more.
The 16 Ciders children are in therapeutic foster care, receiving treatment for their physical needs and for emotional trauma. 6 of the children are younger, 3 sets of twins, but there are older children who will
Right now, all 16 are in therapeutic foster care, receiving treatment for both physical needs and emotional trauma. Whatever crime investigators believe happened inside that house is still, at this point, undisclosed.
The children, as we've been telling you, were removed from this house on Omar Street on June 30th as law enforcement executed a search warrant as they investigated a crime that to this day remains a secret. But what secrets and stories will these children tell?
The parents, Gary Ciders Jr. and Elizabeth Ciders, are charged with child endangering and are being held in the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail on $300,000 bond each. They've pleaded not guilty. The grandparents, Gary Senior and Christina, face those same 16 charges and have also pleaded not guilty, though. Gary Senior has since been released to receive treatment for a medical condition.
Process requires great care. I'll get into what that process is like shortly. Their parents, Gary Ciders Jr. and Elizabeth Ciders, remain in the Southeast Ohio Regional Jail, charged with child endangering. They've pleaded not guilty. Gary's mom and dad, Gary Senior and Christina, have pleaded not guilty to those same 16 charges. Only Gary Senior has been released from jail because he's receiving treatment for a serious medical condition. While the investigation into what was going on,
Children's services workers have already visited the jail to speak with all 4 adults, but the interviews with the children themselves will be handled far more carefully. Experts say the first interview a child gives in a case like this tends to matter more than any that follow, because repeated interviews risk altering a child's memory of events.
What was going on inside the house continues. The main concern is for the children. Children's services workers visited the jail to talk with each of the adult Ciders family members, but the children will also be interviewed delicately and with great care, because really, the first interview will be the most important.
Here's where the record gets murkier. Court filings and law enforcement say the children hadn't been in school for at least the last 6 years, but whether they were ever formally enrolled at all remains unclear. There was a 2001 form truancy citation involving 6 of the older children, but investigators say they couldn't locate the parents in Gary County to serve the paperwork, so that case stalled and never moved forward.
Most important. Court records and law enforcement claim that the children haven't been to school, at least in the last 6 years. But have they ever been to school? We don't know. We know they had to be registered since Gary Jr. and Elizabeth were cited for their 6 older children being habitually truant back in 2020.
At the same time, several of the older children appear to have had active social media accounts, a detail that stands out, since isolation cases like this one usually involve a complete cutoff from the outside world.
Back in 2021, that case never moved forward because investigators couldn't find the parents in Gary County to serve them with the paperwork. But the older children appear to have had social media accounts. I've linked these by looking at who the children are friends with and who they follow, and these accounts appear to belong to the kids. One video shows cats, and it looks like it was taken outside that home on Omar Street with the walkway from the house that leads to...
Some of the posts reference tension with a parent, including references to physical affection feeling uncomfortable and to a relationship with a father that seemed to change over time. Without more context, It's impossible to say for certain whether that reflects typical teenage friction or something more serious.
That leads to the driveway area. Others are reposted videos that show references to relationships. One has a caption that reads, "How I felt after feeling uncomfortable hugging my own dad." Another states, "Everyone yelling at me like, damn, I'm trying." Another states, "Me seeing a little girl spending time / having fun with her dad. I used to be a daddy's little girl." And another shows a scene from a movie or a TV show, and it shows a father yelling at his child. The caption, "My dad since I started being a teenager because I changed and I'm not the little girl he used to."
It's worth noting plainly that we can't verify the emotional intent behind any individual post. Officials describe the home itself as severely unsanitary and say the children were largely isolated aside from their apparent social media access.
Law enforcement said the house was filthy. The children were isolated, apparently with the exception of being able to use social media, and officials say they weren't in school. The Attorney General said the Ciders were hiding the kids. All of the children are in foster care now, as I mentioned, likely with different families in different counties. Vinton is a small county.
The state has directed $1 million in emergency funding to the county's Children's Services Department specifically to support these 16
small
kids.
County. There's no way they could have enough foster families to take in 16 children. State legislators have sent $1 million to the Department of Children and Youth for that area of the state, just for these kids, but that will likely be just a drop in the bucket.
This is a special fund that is being set up specifically for Vinton County. Vinton County does belong to a 3-county consortium, which is Hocking, Vinton, and Ross counties, but these resources are specifically for this emergent need.
That matters because Vinton is a small, rural county. There simply aren't enough foster placements available locally to take in that many children at once, which means many of them are now split across different counties and different foster families. Officials have said the funding will be tracked specifically for costs tied to this case, transportation, clothing, immediate placement needs, and the court-appointed advocates each child will require as their individual case plans are worked out.
Cases. The dollars will be tracked. They are specific to provide resources for these children. There are resources that cover their transportation, their emergent needs, clothing, just their immediate placement. There will be court costs. Each of these children will be before the court. They will have to have special court-appointed folks that will provide services. Each individual child will have to have case plans and those sorts of things worked out. So these dollars will be tracked specifically for this purpose, and we will.
On the legal side, Gary Jr's attorney requested and was granted a broad gag order in the case and has since filed for a bill of particulars, a formal legal request asking the prosecution to lay out specific details about the alleged crimes. That kind of request is typically filed after an indictment, but no indictment has been issued yet.
As all of this is going on, the court process is moving forward. Gary Jr.'s lawyer, who requested and was granted a sweeping gag order, has filed a request for a bill of particulars. That's a legal document that demands specific details from the prosecution about the crimes alleged. That request is usually filed after a defendant has been indicted, but that hasn't happened.
The prosecutor's office is still preparing the case for presentation to a grand jury.
But that hasn't happened yet. But the prosecutor is preparing the case for the grand jury. The interviews of the children, though, particularly the older children, will be very important. So how will investigators and social workers go about interviewing these children so they are not further traumatized? And how do they keep any information from possibly tainting those interviews?
Separately, Gary Jr. is also scheduled to appear in court this week on 4 misdemeanor counts of public indecency tied to an alleged incident at the home in late May involving someone outside the family. The exact nature of that charge hasn't been made public.
Christina Ciders, Elizabeth Ciders, and Gary Jr. all remain in jail. They're being held on a $300,000 bond each. Gary Jr. is scheduled to appear in court later this week for a pre-trial hearing on 4 misdemeanor counts of public indecency that he faces. Those charges relate to alleged incidents at the Ciders home in late May, in which law enforcement say Gary Jr. exposed himself to someone who was not a family member.
We also spoke with a forensic psychiatrist about how professionals approach interviews with children who may have experienced this kind of prolonged isolation, how they keep the process open-ended rather than leading.
Or maybe have issues trusting adults.
Right. So I think there's 2 main aspects to this. There's obviously the therapeutic part, which is We want to provide a nurturing environment where these children can thrive and recover. But obviously, there's also a prosecution to think about. And so, if we're going to interview them, we want to interview them in a way that is neutral, that doesn't re-traumatize them, and we want to keep it, very open-ended.
How they bring in speech language specialists when a child appears nonverbal or developmentally behind, and why getting it right the first time is so critical, both for the child's well-being and for the integrity of any future prosecution.
Sure, it's open-ended so that we're not leading them to a conclusion. One of the things that we do in situations like this, with this particular level of deprivation and neglect, is we will bring in speech language pathologists to assess their communication skills, because we want to make sure that they're able to express themselves and that they.
This case is still unfolding. No one has been indicted. A gag order is limiting what becomes public, and the children at the center of it are only beginning a recovery process that experts say could take months or, for some, years. We'll continue following the case as new details are confirmed.